talking to us about Buoyant Cloud so we can see what our mesh is telling us. Joe, you want to introduce yourself? Joe has the hard job. He has to talk to actual customers and things like that.
Thanks, Flynn. Yeah, so my name's Joe. I'm a solution architect at Buoyant. We are here to talk all things Buoyant Cloud, B Cloud, as we say for sure. And yeah, as Flynn says, I spend much of my time talking to teams of technical folk how Buoyant Cloud, amongst other features, can really add value to their estate.
Cool. I don't really have a lot to add to that. I think the right thing to do here is just to dive into it. I will point out if you have questions, the best place to present those is the workshops channel in the Linkerd Slack. I will get a link set up to the Linkerd Slack that I can show people in a minute. But in the meantime, Joe, take it away.
Okay, cool. So what I've done in preparation for this is, and I wasn't really sure how we were going to kind of format it in time, Flynn, but I've got a bunch of slides. I've got a couple of clusters, EKS clusters in AWS that are joined together using the multi-cluster tools. And we've got Buoyant Cloud agents installed, collecting metrics and sending into like a Buoyant Cloud lab account that I have. And so we can kind of take a look at some of the features and go through those. So yeah, just kind of stop and interrupt me whenever there's a question or
Yeah,
whenever we want to dig a bit deeper on a particular topic. Okay.
all of that sounds good.
Okay. Cool. Okay, so see what your mesh is telling you. So quick agenda. In fact, is there any housekeeping we should do first, Flynn, for anyone watching that has questions, or do you want to just dive straight?
We can just dive into it. I'm about to put up a link for the Linkerd Slack, which is the best way to ask questions. But actually, I'll just go ahead and do that. There you go. If you go to that Slack, there's a channel called Workshops, and I'm paying attention to that to see if anybody has questions. That's about all the housekeeping there really is.
Cool. Thanks. Okay, right. So with that in mind, the agenda is as follows. We've got content on all of this and more. So we've got what is Buoyant Cloud? Like, why are you here? Why are you watching? Why do teams consider deploying the Buoyant Cloud tool and using the feature? What this looks like, the kind of high level architectural level, how data moves, what data is captured, what is not captured. And then there's the implementation, the deployment, how to actually deploy the agent. We've got, like I said, a walkthrough. So I've got a couple of clusters that are both sending data right now into Buoyant Cloud, and we can go and have a look at all of the different sort of features of Buoyant Cloud and kind of walk through them and think about the scenarios where these features are going to be valuable. Golden metrics. Everyone's always asking me, okay, so it's great that we can capture all these metrics, but what metrics should we be capturing? A couple of weeks ago, I did a talk at KubeCon around canary deployments and how Linkerd fits into the model of doing canary deployments. And one of the questions that came up, or one of the commonly asked questions was, so, okay, well, what should we be looking at? What data points should we be looking at? So,
Which is especially fascinating when you're talking about canaries. Yeah.
well, yeah, it's great because I mean you can have all of this really intricate, mature infrastructure and tooling set up, but if your canary deployment, just while we're talking about canary deployments, if the canary deployment fails because there was some data point that we should have been watching that we weren't watching, and all of a sudden this new version of an application is not behaving the way that you would like it to, then yeah. So
Yeah.
we can talk about gold metrics. Yeah. We've got alerts and integrations, multi-cluster visibility. As I've said, I've got a couple of clusters we'll look at. Data privacy and security, especially with the ramping up of AI tools and agents and MCP. And okay, well, AI is great and fantastic, but how do you make sure that it can be used safely and securely? And so there's no AI sort of demo, but we can talk about like, okay, well, how does B Cloud fit into that. Some best practices. We've got the demo and Q&A. And I just realized I've copied alerts and integrations twice on that list.
Well, I mean, alerts and integrations are very important. So,
yes.
I was going to point out, as you went through this one, another thing that I think is really important that you just touched on with data privacy is talking about what data are captured and what data are not, which is, I hear a lot of questions about that.
Yeah, it's very, very top of mind. Compliance, regulations, security. We're kind of seeing new sort of vulnerabilities being exposed now, and all of the latest security is coming out by the week as it happens. So, okay, cool. Let's jump into the next. Okay, so the problem: why do teams need Buoyant Cloud? Well, the first big point that I kind of find myself talking to customers about a lot, and not just customers, but just folks in the community that are kind of trying to work out how should we run our observability stack, is I think we're going through a bit of a transition at the moment between having a small number of very protected and valuable Kubernetes clusters to having many clusters. I'm seeing lots of kind of larger organizations start to kind of say to their dev development squads or different domains, okay, well, you can have a cluster, you can have a cluster. So we're kind of going through, I think we're going through that kind of pet and cattle analogy that we went through years ago.
There are a whole lot of ways where multiple clusters make a lot more sense than namespaces within a cluster or something like that. And as soon as you talk about service mesh, a lot of other tools that people like vCluster, turn out to be really difficult to make work with a mesh in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and I think I think as well, the tooling available now to actually manage and bootstrap and kind of scale clusters is becoming much more reliable and more mature. So teams aren't having to go and instrument a load of automation scripts or templates or the tooling just to manage the clusters they've got. It's a lot easier now. So yeah, we can talk about kind of like how Buoyant Cloud helps bring multiple service meshes into a single pane of glass, a single dashboard of ready-made sort of graphs and dashboards and bits of functionality. The next problem is a lack of unified visibility. So not a stretch from the first point. It's kind of okay. Well, organizations talk to us all the time about, okay, I've got these like 10 clusters. I don't really know enough about each of them. I'd like to know more about what's going on in each of these clusters and kind of figure out, have I got any issues? Maybe not necessarily something's broken, but if services are not interacting as quickly as they should be, or there's some of those golden metrics are not kind of reaching the thresholds that they should be. Reactive troubleshooting is the next one. I would say that it's one of the biggest gains that I'm seeing teams use AI for at the moment, kind of being less reactive and more proactive. And so as agents and MCP and all these AI technologies get used more and more, we're starting to see tools move the incident response and outage response kind of to the left. So that's interesting. Teams need SRE tooling without building everything from scratch. One of the core principles of Linkerd as a product is that we do our best to make everything as easy as possible for the user, the administrator, the engineer. And so Buoyant Cloud fits into that perfectly, because you can deploy Buoyant Cloud and kind of out of the box, your metrics, your golden metrics are kind of there in a dashboard ready for you to kind of look at immediately. You haven't then got to go back into your control plane config in your service mesh or your applications and do a bunch of instrumentation and talk to your development teams about, okay, now we need to send metrics to this other place. Like it's very easy. The barrier of entry is very low. And then the pain points. So a couple of pain points that I kind of come across quite regularly. How do I know the mesh is healthy? How do I keep it healthy? Now they sound like questions that soon, we're going to be asking these AI agents to go and kind of figure out. And one of the things they're going to be doing is looking at, okay, well, what do our metrics tell us? What do our logs tell us? So Buoyant Cloud gives you a lot of that visibility without having to go and do a ton of work.
And if you want to be sure that your agent is not hallucinating, then understanding what the metrics are telling you as a human is really important.
Yeah, I think I was talking to a customer recently who said that they had a new engineer join their team, and they were going through a challenge that only new starters are going to have at the moment, whereby it's very easy to kind of outsource a lot of that early thinking and a lot of that early onboarding to an AI tool, instead of kind of starting to build that context up in their brains and go through that kind of muscle, exercise the brain muscle of like, okay, how does everything plug together? How do I know myself if there's a problem?
Yeah, that one's really interesting. It's a lot of the agents or a lot of the tools out there really are particularly good at doing things like looking over an entire code base and answering things like, but where in this code base does this thing happen? Give me a summary of what this is doing. Because, we humans have structural limitations in our brains that make it hard to do that with really big code bases, and they don't have the same limitation. But yeah, an awful lot of that early stuff with trying to figure out what's a good idea, which problems should we solve, broadly speaking, what's the philosophy of this tool with respect to this problem.
Right.
It makes me nervous to think that we're onboarding people by telling them to go and trust the agent instead of having that in their heads.
Yeah, right. And I think for larger teams, what can quickly happen very easily is that you end up in a game of whack-a-mole, whereby you've got an incident. Your error rate of comms between app one and app two, your error rate starts to go up. And so an agent could easily say, oh, we need to make this change. But if you already know that change would break something else in the stack because you have that context, then yeah. So I think it's interesting. I think for new starters, it's a really interesting time to kind of go into a new organization and be like, okay, well, how do I make sure I can make the most out of these tools without losing context?
It's been pretty fascinating actually to play with some of the coding agents and watch them do exactly what you just described. Oh, I can fix this way, when you as the guiding human are like, no, that is a terrible, terrible idea. It will break the entire world. And, maybe they could make it and then go and debug everything, but it's so much easier to just not make the mistake in the first place.
Yeah.
Anyway, lest we get off into ranting about AI, let's sorry about that.
Let's move on. Okay, so the command center for Linkerd, I love this sort of catchphrase, and it kind of just starts to kind of move away from, okay, well, we've got the problems, what's the solution? Well, we have a tool that we can use that gives us that single pane of glass, that instant access to data, with alerts and integrations set up. And so teams can very, very quickly stand up an observability stack with everything they would typically want: data being captured, data being processed, information being the output, and then being proactively alerted via various integrations to tools that most orgs use: Slack, Teams, PagerDuty, etc. Yeah. So I think I've probably been through much of what's on this slide already. So I'll try and keep everyone awake by kind of just very quickly moving on. But yeah, what is Buoyant Cloud? It's a dashboard and monitoring and alerting tool for Buoyant Enterprise for Linkerd. Provides a single pane of glass across all the Linkerd managed clusters. It contains proactive diagnostics and performance management, amongst many other things. Okay, now we start to get into sort of the technical aspects, architecture overview. So there's a Buoyant Cloud agent which pushes data out, but we should be absolutely explicit about this, and maybe this bit should have been highlighted and boldened and been made into caps. No inbound connections are required, and the agent is lightweight, so
Actually, let me back up just a moment there.
Yeah.
No inbound connections required, meaning Buoyant Cloud will never make a connection into your cluster. Your cluster makes connections outward to bCloud and pushes data. We do not need any inbound access into your cluster. I've heard a lot of people ask questions about that. When I first started here, that was one of the things that was actually really nice to wrap my own head around and to realize that that had been thought of. That we did not need to open holes in firewalls and things like that. That was really great.
Yeah, yeah. We're not going to be banging on the firewall saying, "Give me this, give me that." It's a push, not a pull. The agent's lightweight, it's minimal resource footprint, so we're not going to be expecting teams to kind of stand up node pools or even like dedicated nodes for these services, these pods. Generally, just get scheduled on the user nodes that teams are already using for their apps. It can be deployed via a separate Helm chart. So this is separate, but it's kind of fully using that typical Helm deployment process that most of our customers use. I would say I think most of our users are kind of deploying using Helm now. And so yeah, I think the implementation there is kind of like, okay, we're giving customers and users this great dashboard, getting this great amount of data, but we're not actually even asking a lot of the compute, which is very typical for Linkerd. We're very, very big on kind of minimal resource footprint across the compute stack. And then so yeah, and I think the big thing is that I kind of try and speak to customers about quite a lot is we try and make sure the same principles are applied to a lot of the features that we create. And so whether that's a feature in Linkerd, whether it's a feature within Buoyant Cloud, whether that's one of the other features, and I think that tells, because I'd say Buoyant Cloud is one of the most well-used enterprise features and the most popular. So this is a big one as well. Wouldn't you say, Flynn? What data does Buoyant Cloud collect? What is not collected? This is something that you touched on at the beginning. So, okay, what is collected?
This is
metadata. Yeah. So metadata about deployment, stateful sets, daemon sets, the CRDs, Linkerd CRDs. Obviously, proxy metrics about application traffic. So that's those golden metrics, success rates, latencies, and so on. And some mTLS data, not the private keys, public keys only. Again, that should probably have been boldened.
In fact, I'm not even sure we collect the public keys. I think we collect hashes of the public keys. I would have to go back and check that.
So it's more about public key info.
The point is that bCloud wants to be able to talk about the structure of your certificate chain without revealing anything about your certificates.
Right. Okay, yeah. And I think the right-hand side of this slide is actually probably more important to most folks. Yeah. It's like, okay, well, what's not being collected? So that application traffic is never being captured, never being distributed, never being sent, never being stored, isn't being touched by the Buoyant Cloud agent or anything like that. Private keys, of course, they're never kind of captured, but it sounds obvious, but it's not always. And like, I think it's kind of reassuring to a lot of folks just to be explicit. Yeah. And of course, again, the third point is quite similar to the first one, just application payloads. We're not touching application traffic. This is about kind of that metadata and kind of proxy metrics and things like that. Yeah.
Although when we say metadata here, like we don't. Joe can correct me if I'm wrong about this one. I believe we will collect things like traffic rates, success rates, that kind of metadata. We do not collect things like the headers of requests or, really even in the specifics about any single request.
No, yeah, that's right. Yeah. We just don't touch the contents of application traffic. So.
That's the kind of that's the kind of thing that you need the Linkerd dashboard in your cluster for.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, I think if customers are looking for that level or not that level, but data in that area, then a more localized tool is what they'll be looking for. So just a quick slide on what this might look like in terms of deploying the agent. So the prerequisites are a enterprise strategic plan. You also need the Linkerd control plane installed, and then if you're deploying via Helm, you would need Helm. Of course, you can go and like vendor the templates and create your own deployment approach, but it's not often that I see that. It's extreme circumstances.
I was shaking my head there because vendoring templates is one of those things that always makes me. I guess the right way to put it is that every time I've found myself thinking that was the right way to do things, I have always found myself reevaluating my life choices later. But you know, there were places where it is definitely the right tool for the job. Sure.
Yeah, and some folks can get away with it for a while until they have an incident and they need support, and then support is just made so much harder. So I think our support engineers really appreciate folks sticking to the sort of universal standards of.
Yeah, there's a real tension between the extra maybe confidence is the right word I'm looking for. You know that you know exactly what's in the thing that you've vendored. You know that it's predictable. There's a real tension between the comfort of that knowledge and oh crap, now we need to respond to something quickly. So
Yeah.
it's a tougher that's a tough balancing act sometimes.
Yeah. So yeah, once the prerequisites have been met, obviously we need to go and grab client ID and secret, which can come from the Buoyant Cloud dashboard, which we do have some links for, I believe. There's a couple of places you can get those details from, I believe. So yeah, but yeah, I mean, as you can see, the actual install command isn't tons and tons of overrides and code. It's pretty small, pretty simple, pretty easy, and as always, low barrier to entry. Okay, so that's kind of an extension from the previous slide. Like the agent configuration has a custom values file. It's configurable, so you can set things like resource requests and limits for the agent pod if you need to. The agent, as we mentioned before, doesn't receive connections. It's a push mechanism, so the agent does need outbound HTTPS access to the Buoyant Cloud endpoints, which is important for any teams who've got really strong constraints on sort of those egress boundaries. And again, just touching on the Helm point, it's obviously upgraded via Helm. So what does this actually look like? I've added a screenshot that I've tried to size appropriately because there's a lot of data, there's a lot of information on the screen, so I hope that kind of looks okay. But as you can see, there's a unified view across kind of all the connected clusters. So I think the screenshot that I used in the slide isn't going to be representative of what I've got right now and what I can show in the demo, but it'd be quite similar in terms of multiple clusters, and you can filter and select which clusters you want to look at the metrics for. There's at a glance health status of the mesh. We've got some quick indicators, so control plane health, data plane health, version information, resource usage. We've got some really high level data, such as the number of meshed versus unmeshed workloads. I'd say actually, although that's very high level, it's a data point which is probably used more often than you would believe. One of the first things that customers go to our support team go to when there's any kind of issue or connectivity error, and when they're dealing with problems is like, okay, well, are the pods meshed? If they're meshed, then you go. It's like the first question that we're asking. And so
it's one of those things that sounds really silly, but is actually really, really important. There was, I don't remember exactly how long ago this was, but there was a point where I literally spent half an hour trying to figure out what in the world was going on with a cluster that I was running. And after half an hour, I realized that the problem was that I didn't have meshed pods. And that half an hour is not an exaggeration. I actually checked because I wanted to see how much time I had wasted. It was thoroughly embarrassing.
I think a lot of folks have been there, Flynn, honestly, and as well, I suppose, for compliance.
Probably most of us at Buoyant have at some point.
Yeah. And I was just going to say, I think for reporting as well, it can be quite important because you kind of need to be showing and evidence in the pods that need to be meshed are meshed. And so yeah, again, in the overview page, we've got kind of recent events as well in there as well, so you can get a quick snapshot of what's been happening lately. Workload metrics. This is another screen. Again, we'll have a look at that in a few minutes. But we've got some golden metrics. Those metrics we were talking about earlier. So I will just go very quickly from kind of top to bottom. We've got those HTTP metrics, which are kind of those metrics that you kind of want to be looking at: success rates, TCP success rates, error rates, P95 latency. Those are those metrics that I was talking about earlier that we would tie into like a canary deployment. But they're also metrics that you would want to be aware of and alerting on as well if they drop below the kind of the budget for those metrics. Request volume, RPS, always important. And I find this one's used quite a lot for sizing guides. We've got some customers who have got highly scalable estates, and they can add kind of hundreds of thousands of pods in the event of a weekend, if they've got some kind of seasonal event on. And so they use these kind of metrics, especially the request volume, to kind of have a look at, okay, when do we need to scale more, when do we scale less, how do we scale vertically, horizontally. So this is all important data. We've got real-time CPU and memory usage, the Kubernetes workloads. We've got some historical graphs. As I said earlier, we can drill down from kind of like the cluster down to the namespace level to the workload levels. You can be really fine-grained about the data that you're trying to have a look at. And then you can quickly sort of have a look at which workloads are in trouble, provided that they are in trouble, of course. They might not be. We've got a topology page, and actually, this is a question for you. Have you found yourself using the topology page much? Because I personally wasn't using it a lot until recently, when I got a question from a customer, and since then I found to be using this a lot more.
One of the things that I find, okay, let me back up. I need to qualify this, right? My role is to be a technical evangelist, primarily within the open source community, right? Which means that I am more likely in practice for the stuff that I'm doing on a day-to-day basis to be using Linkerd Viz or the Linkerd dashboard than I am to be using Buoyant Cloud, right? One of the huge differences between this topology graph in Viz or the Linkerd dashboard and Buoyant Cloud is that the topograph in bcloud spans namespaces, and the one in the open source tools does not. So for me, when I go and I look at this view, it's always 100% of the time, because there's something weird going on and I'm trying to understand how the application is put together. Or if I'm the one who wrote the application, I'm trying to see how do the traffic flows match what I think should be happening. And every time I do that, cross namespace traffic is an issue, and I get annoyed that I can't see it. So this is kind of a long way of bringing us around to, I find the topology view very useful for debugging and very useful for building a mental model of what is actually going on versus what I think is going on. And there are cases where it's not what I'm looking for because I'm not trying to do those two activities. But I do find it useful, really useful for those two activities. And the fact that we have multiple namespaces in the topology view in Buoyant Cloud, oh my God, I wish we had that in the open source tools. It is such a bigger deal than I feel like people commonly realize.
Yeah, I mean the screenshot's quite simple because I didn't want it to look too much of a like a spider web, but actually like this very quickly becomes really like a complex web. And so one of the great features that I haven't included in the screenshot, I should have done this, is you can actually highlight the different types of connections. So plain text connections, TLS connections, non-TLS connections. You can really start to see.
How about that bit partway down your list of filter by namespace cluster workload?
Oh yeah.
Oh man, it's funny because we talk about this and we kind of rapidly get into this place where we sound like a couple of zealots, just like waxing rhapsodic about some random thing. But the fact of the matter is that even if you have a very small number of microservices, the moment the call graph is deeper than a one, right? Which is to say, the moment you have anything more complex than A calls B and gets a response. If you have A calls B, which calls C, and then the response has to go back, or maybe B can call either C or D, and those are all simple, common cases. They also turn out to be ludicrously complex to visualize well. And as you get more into larger numbers of microservices, then being able to kind of zoom in on what you want, being able to narrow your field of view, and then being able to re-expand when you need to, being able to do things like, oh my God, look at all these lines, but are any of them non-mTLS?
Right.
What, huh? Are any of these like this is a mess, but how much of this is HTTP versus gRPC, which I think we can do now, right? Um,
Um,
there's I'm not entirely sure about that one actually. Maybe I shouldn't have picked that example. But being
we
able
can
to
have a look.
filter, the filtering and such, and the ability that even just like pinning a node, where you
Mm.
can pin a particular node so it won't get drawn away or whatever, is all of these are a bunch of little things that add together to form a very impressive user experience if you're trying to go through and understand what's happening in your cluster. So there's I had a discussion recently with some of the folks working on the Linkerd dashboard. There are a variety of different sorts of tasks that you might use bCloud or the dashboard to do. And this is kind of one of the first ones of
Mm.
give yourself an overview of what's going on in the cluster, because that way you can start bringing your intuition to bear on figuring out where to look next.
Yeah.
And um, there are a lot of times where I feel like many of these tools don't put enough emphasis on understanding how people are going to be using them and what plays to the strengths of a human versus not. So there's a lot of stuff in bCloud that I think does a good job of that, and I really like that. All right,
Yeah.
I'm finished acting like a zealot for a topology graph for now.
No, that was great.
But yeah,
Yeah,
it's really cool. It's really useful stuff.
yeah. I found myself using it more and more, especially for like say debugging and that last point at the bottom, the where does the traffic go off against my API gateway? As you say, if you've got plenty of upstreams, then it can quickly become hard to kind of keep track of that stuff. So this is really good. Okay, cool. On to the next thing. Traffic. So there's a dedicated traffic page where you get a traffic view. You can again select by kind of time frames, which is the obvious thing when you're kind of trying to kind of just narrow down on what happened with a certain flow between that you made at like 4:30 or whatever time it may be. Um, we have some policy columns as well, so you can kind of see what the auth policy status is. Um, and the actual data is the same underlying data as the topology pages. It's just a different view and slightly different information that's being surfaced. Okay, events and health checks. This is a big one. I spend a lot of time talking to customers about this one. And so it does the obvious. It's a continuous health assessment of the Linkerd deployment. It helps with a lot of those debugging situations that you were talking about a minute ago, Flynn, where it's like we want to be proactive about these things. And so again, using the topology view, using health and events, you quickly start to form a picture if you're in any kind of incident, or if you're not an incident, even if you're just trying to do some business as usual work, and you just want to kind of see how the cluster, how the mesh has been running over the last couple of days, the last week or whatever. You can kind of get a picture. Okay, well, we've had these events. These are the amount of like non-TLS connections we've had in that topology view. This how many notifications we've had, etc., etc. And so you can see lots of different things. So there's various different event types. There's version incompatibilities, certificate expiration warnings. Again, certificates are a big topic. I know we've covered those in Service Mesh Academy episodes before. Configuration drift. Rollout events, this is one that gets kind of highlighted and discussed quite a lot, because there's always like, okay, well, there's been a rollout. Why has there been a rollout? Or, oh, we've had this behavior in our apps that we don't quite understand. Well, okay, well, you had this rollout. What caused the rollout? Oh, yeah, one of our dev teams made an upgrade. And so, like, this is super information that happens all the time. It's like, oh, well, these connection rates changed. Why did they change? Oh, well, we can see that you've done a deployment and it's caused a rollout. Oh, right, yeah, I'll go and speak to the developers then. You know.
Speaking of things that sound really silly and totally aren't, why did this rollout happen?
Yeah.
Is one of those questions where that simply doesn't come up in a development environment. And then in a significant production environment, yeah, it's a big deal.
Yeah, yeah. And maybe this is a little bit of like the transition that I spoke about before, where we're going from kind of a pet to cattle. I think that engineers now are becoming much more comfortable with things like blue-green deployments, with canary deployments, where they're going to actually be doing these rollout events almost to the point where they've forgotten that one has happened. And so then these pages help surface that information to them, which 10 years ago, 15 years ago would have been like a big event. You're doing a restart of a production application. It gets planned for. It goes through all the change boards. Whereas now, kind of, maybe even 5. Yeah. Well, actually, I mean, I was talking to a colleague recently about. I've been surprised last couple of years about how many folks have gone to some of the conferences, i.e. KubeCon, that are actually quite new to Kubernetes, right? So like maybe this is still a thing that happens within a lot of teams.
I think that I have not checked for the last couple, but for a long time, a majority of the attendees of KubeCon they were first timers, and a lot of them were new to Kubernetes as well as being new to KubeCon. Within Buoyant, we talk a lot about the expert blind spot, where we've gotten so accustomed to thinking about a bunch of details about Linkerd and such that we forget that we've been doing this for long enough to have become sort of indoctrinated with Kubernetes. We've internalized a bunch of things about it. And yeah, there's a massive chunk in the world that's still out there running monoliths and getting the entire organization to sign off before they, excuse me, do a production release, and it's a big deal. And they're still running infrastructure that is pets, in the sense of I guess the best way to summarize that one is really, I remember, this was a long time ago for me, but I remember a time when we had this production database server where if that machine had gone up in smoke, then no humans knew how we would actually recreate it, because before the containerization of the world, it was just a huge Unix machine with years of configuration that had piled up. And that's, to me, that's the killer thing about containerized apps, right? It's not that they let us orchestrate a bunch of stuff over pods, although that's cool. The thing that makes them an absolute, the absolute killer app part of that is providing a standard for how you run them. And I don't think it's really possible to overstate how big a deal that is.
Yeah, 100%. I think, years of running a system where different team members have come and gone and documentation gets fragmented, it quickly becomes a headache. Yeah, but it quickly became a headache.
I'm sure you've had the experience of looking at a particular config file or whatever and going, who made this change and why?
Yeah.
Wait, why is this set to this value? And sometimes you look at it, and if you've kept good enough records, you realize that you did it a year ago and then forgot about it.
Yeah.
A lot of the time you realize that somebody just slipped it in at 10 p.m. on a Friday night because something was worked and they needed to get it working again.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So those last 2 points, so new workload, meshed and unmeshed, and the sanity checking, mesh installs and upgrades, again, just two features and sort of scenarios that you can find yourself in, just making sure that workloads are being meshed or unmeshed in the event that there's some testing going on. Generally, that's the reason why teams unmesh workloads, generally just to do some testing. And then, of course, just sanity checking, just sense checking those installs and upgrades. Alerts and integrations. Now, this is becoming very apparent to us in the customer success and the customer support engineering team at Buoyant. That this alerts part, or this alerts functionality, is used by a lot of orgs. What I'm seeing a lot of is Buoyant Cloud sort of feeding into a sort of an internal ecosystem of tools within customer teams, where they're able to say, okay, well, we'll just piggyback our existing alerting flow with Buoyant Cloud, and so we can send those health events, traffic anomalies, those rollout events we just mentioned, SLO breaches. We can send those kind of data points to Slack, to PagerDuty, to Teams, and even to Datadog. We've got customers who plug their Datadog deployment into vCloud or connect them together. So this is becoming a more widely adopted feature. Yeah. Multi-cluster visibility. So it's been a point that's been mentioned a couple of times. This screenshot was taken a couple of weeks ago, so it doesn't exactly represent what I've got right now. But you can see there's 3 clusters. You can see the request per second, the success rate, some hardware allocation or hardware usage in terms of CPU and memory, whether HA mode is turned on or off now. Obviously, this was not a production deployment. I know some of my colleagues have got data centers in their house with lots of capacity where they can deploy production-like environments. I won't name any names, Phil.
We don't need to name any names. We both
No.
know. Yeah.
But yeah, so
we literally have one guy who has a 19-inch rack in his house that. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, the infrastructure in my house is pretty much limited to a few Raspberry Pis.
Yeah, well, yeah. Mine's just some K3D clusters. I do have an AWS account that I use from time to time, but yeah. But you can quickly see how you can quickly get many clusters and then short golden metrics into one very easy place where you can say, oh, well, hang on, we've got 5 clusters. Yeah. But one of them, there's clearly some pressure on that cluster, so we can then make decisions based on that. It's data-driven decision making, right? It's quickly getting the right data and then be able to make very, very quick engineering decisions on them. So it could be that you have applications deployed across 5 different clusters, but you can quickly see that the success rate is on 100% for 4 of those 5 clusters. Say the last cluster is there's a problem. Okay, well, let's kind of steer traffic away from that cluster, and we can do maintenance or some debugging. So again, this feeds into that kind of that kind of run the business as usual kind of flow that teams working. The use case at the bottom is probably not the one I could have gone with in terms of, okay, are my clusters running the same version? Although you can use it for that. I think most of the time customers use it to what am I seeing any anomalies in one cluster versus the other, like I just said, for a success rate, or is one getting more volume than the other?
Although, are they all running the same Linkerd version is a surprisingly useful question to be able to ask.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, we do talk to customers that might have a question, or I'm seeing different behavior between pods in one cluster versus the other, and like you said, Flynn, first question is, okay, well, are they running the same version? Because that's where we would start by saying, well, they should be if you're expecting exactly the same behavior. Not to say that behavior changes significantly between versions, but you want to make sure those versions of the Linkerd deployment are the same, right? Common pitfalls. So just a few things that we see sometimes. Agent can't connect. Like we said before, the data is sent from the agent out, so it's network policies, egress rules, firewall rules. If you're in if you deployed in a hyperscaler, if you've got security groups or ACLs that you need to update, just those kind of things. Cluster name mismatch. So renaming after registration can cause some confusion. That does happen sometimes when it's like a cluster has been deployed as a proof of concept, and then all of a sudden product managers and engineering managers are being asked to turn that proof of concept into a production deployment, and so there's some.
Oh, that never happens.
No, yeah, exactly. Stale data, agent pods not running or crash looping. I don't see this one very often. This is actually quite. I wouldn't say. I know it's in the common pitfalls and troubleshooting. It's more the troubleshooting side than the common pitfalls. This is not a common one. Missing
I think
metrics.
it used to be more common in the past. I definitely remember hearing people talk about it, but I haven't heard people talk about it in quite a while.
Yeah. Missing metrics, so workloads, if they're not meshed, no sidecar, no proxy metrics, right? Like the application needs to be meshed for you to get those golden metrics out. Certificate issues.
Pretty much the case for anything with Linkerd, but it's still worth mentioning.
Yeah, again, it's one of those things that's very easy to kind of assume is the case when it's not. Certificate issues. The secret for the credentials obviously needs to be correct, and then for resources, we can provide a link to the Buoyant troubleshooting docs. We can probably provide that here in a couple of minutes. But those docs contain some really useful kind of troubleshooting information and steps and flows that can be taken, like prior to maybe submitting a support request or assuming that something's broken somewhere. Yeah, quite often it's kind of a, have we read the manual? Have we read the docs? Have we started there?
Is that the troubleshooting Linkerd Buoyant page you want?
Yes, I would say. Yes, that's the one.
This is why it's kind of nice every so often to have more than one person on here.
Yes. How are you finding the guest format of these, Flint, after doing these on your own for so often?
I personally tend to find it really nice because it means I don't have to do all the prep work ahead of time. Whoops, I did not mean for that to go away so quickly. So yeah, but also, and more seriously, you know a lot more about bCloud than I do. So I would rather have the experts on, as it were, right?
Yeah, that's it. Okay, so quickly, just some best practices, because I'm not sure how much time we're going to have, but I do want to get into kind of like, let's have a poke around and a click around the dashboard.
Yeah. Demos are always good. People like to know that we're actually doing things.
Yeah. So yeah,
I'll point out that this first one about naming clusters is one that I have personally been burned by. In particular, if, like me, you will bring up a test environment and then bring it down and then bring it back up and then bring it back down. If you don't use the same name, then we think you're spinning up and down lots and lots and lots of clusters. And for the kind of bCloud account I have, it won't let me do that after a little while.
Yeah. It's something that's caught me a few times as well. And sometimes I get asked, well, how should we name things? It's kind of like, well, just make it descriptive enough that you know exactly which cluster that is. If you go into that multi-cluster kind of view that I had open a few slides ago, where it was like you can see all of the clusters in a kind of a table, then you kind of want to know which one's which. So it's more the user needs to kind of be able to differentiate between them. So yeah. Obviously deploy the agent to every cluster, even dev and staging, because again, that helps you kind of track, well, my error rate for this application in dev is different to UAT. So why is that? Is that a version difference? Is that a configuration difference? Do we need to do anything with that information? Integrate alerts from day one. We always say, like, the sooner you are aware of things happening in the cluster, the better. Of course, you can make decisions and save that blast radius a little bit if anything does happen that was unwanted. Workload exclusion. So this does come up from time to time when we're starting to onboard users into Buoyant Cloud, and it's like, okay, well, this is a lot. I have got a big cluster. This is a lot. How do we kind of make this a lot more usable for teams only wanting information about specific workloads, where you can use the exclusion. Topology, regularly again, that topology view that we were talking about earlier, you can use it to kind of catch unexpected dependencies early. And so again, if you've got that API gateway and then an app that might talk to a few different upstreams, Flynn, that you mentioned, I think you can kind of catch those things early on and just make sure that you've got network policies in place, that you've got scaling set correctly, that the pods are right sized for what you've got going on. Yeah.
That actually, I think, is a thing that is widely undervalued about service meshes. The fact that they can show you what the actual call graph for your application is, rather than the one that the developer thinks is the call graph of the application.
Yeah.
A lot of what I do are demo apps that are intended to show off certain aspects of certain operational aspects of microservices applications. And it's deeply fascinating to me the number of times that I, as the author, will look at the topology graph and realize that it actually looks different than I was expecting it to.
Yeah.
And this is extremely useful because there are absolutely times that I have changed the way the app is put together because I want the call graph to look a particular way. Or if you're in production, there are going to be times where knowing that will let you alter the scale of things, or will let you, will reveal things that you might not have thought about with respect to security. It's a pretty big deal in microservices.
Yeah. It's I completely agree with your statement about it looking differently to how you would expect it to. There's always more components in that topology view than you kind of expect, because you're quite, if you've got a distributed architecture, even in a demo app, if you've got lots going on, you can quickly only use a small number of components, and then you forget there's all these other things going on, right? So yeah, review the topology regularly and just make sure that you've got things scaled. It's usually scaling and size, and I find that it's like, okay, well, you've got 20 pods trying to talk to 2 pods that are kind of downstream, and your CPU and your memory usage, or your kind of you might want to rethink that sizing. But yeah, keep the agent updated. Obviously, housekeeping, maintenance. Make sure that those help upgrades are done on the agent chart. Use signature verification for supply chain security. Again, linking into that kind of compliance piece. I think that one question that comes up quite often is okay, well, this is all great and we trust kind of what we're getting, but we have this report we need to send, and we're being audited. We've got this compliance requirement to kind of use things like SBOMs and all these other pieces. How do we go about doing that? And yeah, always verify the artifacts and send diagnostics. So it's there, use it, it will help. It's always better to have all the data than to be having to go and find it reactively when there's an incident.
You want to talk, or I may have missed this. Did you already talk about what goes into the diagnostics bundle that Send Diagnostics hands back?
No, we can talk about it. So if you think about,
high level anyway.
Yeah, so it's log. Most of the useful information there is the logs, right? It's
logs, in particular the logs from the Linkerd control plane.
Control plane, yeah. I was about to say, the control plane logs, because depending on the request, depending on what's going on in the scenario, we always would ask for the control plane logs anyway. So again, it's kind of speeding up that process of, okay, well, let's look at the data. There's a problem. Here's what we think the problem might be. We have these control plane logs available. Customers can send them very easily, rather than us having to help customers go and collect them and then package them up and then send them. So the important bit's the control plane logs in the bundle. Yeah, and We've also got kind of like custom bundles that we use for customers as well sometimes as well, depending on the environment, the estate, how things are plumbed together. Yeah. Q&A. So should we jump into a Q&A now, or do you want to just have a look in the UI, in the Buoyant Cloud UI for a little bit first, and then see what questions?
So there's one question that I saw on the chat from like 15 minutes ago. Can I check the status of the gateway in hierarchical mode? I'm not sure I've heard you mention hierarchical mode, so I'm not entirely sure what the question is, but maybe you know. Oh, wait. I bet you this was when we were talking about multi-cluster. If you're not doing flat networks, does Buoyant Cloud get to see the status of the multi-cluster gateways?
We can have a look at that because I have got a multi-cluster deployment, and I can't remember now actually if I've got the gateway deployed. So we can.
Well, that'll be fun to take a look at.
Yes. Okay. Cool.
So in that case, let's dive into the demo.
All right. Okay. Okay. So we are in the overview now. You can see at the top we've got 2 clusters selected. So we're in the overview page, but we've got 2 clusters. 2 Linkerd deployments, 24 mesh workloads, 28 proxies. And then you can see some of the control plane metrics that we talked about earlier, resource usage, traffic, some Linkerd deployments. And we can see there's an event there where some traffic's being denied to port 9999 from the agent. Okay, so the question was about the multi-cluster gateway, right?
Yep.
So we can see here that
there's a multi-cluster gateway.
Yeah, right. So there's a cluster identifier. So this is SMA demo cluster. We're in the Linkerd multi-cluster namespace, and the pod is the Linkerd gateway pod. So we can click on that and just find out a little bit of information. We can see when the pod started. Obviously, the pod name we already kind of know, but it's there. The version, the proxy version, which again speaks back to that question before, Flynn, like when you're trying to look at some of these issues, one of the first questions is, what version are we running? We've got some resource usage, and then we have got some diagnostics. Now, there's not a lot of traffic like going in and out at the moment of this, so this looks a little bit empty, but you can kind of...
in the lower right, what's that unexpected per minute?
So this is some TCP connections that are hitting the gateway. Yeah. So
what makes them unexpected?
What makes them unexpected? So I think this would be for traffic that the gateway isn't there to process. So obviously the Linkerd gateway is there to handle Linkerd traffic.
Right.
There's something in my cluster hitting the gateway that it's like, no, go away, leave me alone, kind of thing. Which again is a pretty valuable metric, right? You kind of want to know that the connections that are being made to these critical pieces of the infrastructure are the connections that you expect. And if you've got production workloads that are speaking to each other over these gateways, you kind of want to make sure that it's only serving the connections that you want to be serving.
So how would you go about trying to, and I should point out, by the way, Joe and I have not talked about this ahead of time, so I'm just putting him on the spot in random ways. How might you go about trying to figure out what that unexpected traffic is?
Me personally, I would dive straight into the logs. You could have a look depending on what it is, you could have a look in Buoyant Cloud, and you could have a look at some of the information in there in some of these other features. I don't actually even know what that traffic is, just thinking about it right now. But typically, like if it kind of depends. If I'm connected to the cluster, if I'm on a VPN, or if I'm connected to it, I would typically I spend a lot of time in the terminal anyway now, a lot more now with the use of these AI tools that I'm kind of interacting with all the time. So it would be very easy for me to kind of check the logs, but we can look at traffic here, right? So we can this is the allowed traffic.
Yeah, for me, looking at this, I'd probably start with traffic or topology.
Yeah. So you could look at topology as well. So it was in SMA demo 1, which is this left side, and it was the gateway, right?
Yep, the Linkerd multi-cluster namespace.
Yes, we can. So I'm not
That
actually
says it's
seeing
100%.
that.
Huh.
Which, well, this is from the metrics daemon set to the salesman. This is not the gateway traffic. So, and the reason the reason for that is could be simply that the traffic that's hitting the gateway could even be the health probe.
I was wondering if it's the health probe because 12 per minute is every 5 seconds, which sounds about right, you know.
It could be. Yeah. But typically, you could use a topology view and you could see kind of like, okay, well, what's hitting it? What's the success rate? What port are we on? And then the feature I mentioned earlier that I really like is this these labels here, where you can kind of just change these labels and you can just highlight things like let's look at TLS and let's highlight unknown edges. There aren't any. That's kind of to be expected, I suppose. Plain text. Okay, so we've got some plain text connections on 9993 between the Buoyant Cloud metrics daemon set and the data plane operator. So for that kind of compliance reporting, it's great to be able to go, oh, I didn't know that was plain text traffic. Well,
yeah, like why is that happening? And it seems to be happening in both of the clusters.
Oh yeah. So it's not something I've kind of set up as a kind of as a gotcha there. Yeah.
So this kind of thing, by the way, is why I think the topology view is pretty cool. Where a second ago you would have noticed that Joe picked a particular namespace and then the topo view zoomed to that namespace as opposed to looking at our spider web here. I think you can also drag the nodes around. Can you do that?
Yeah, you can. You can. It gets very messy very quickly, but you can kind of move them. If I just pick one that's not going to make too much of a mess, you can kind of move them, and you can kind of, and then you can, like I say, you can click on a node as it sees, and you can kind of like just kind of like, okay, well, I want to just filter on that particular node, so we'll just have a look at that one. Alternatively, you can hide them as well. Right. And the other thing I should mention actually while we're here is this time. Oh yeah. Because quite often something's not there and it's like, okay, well, that's because it's the last minute, and this happened 20 minutes ago when the developer reported that there was a problem, and so like, okay, I need to go back to the last hour or whatever it might be. So so back to where we were.
Actually, how about let's go to traffic for a moment and take a look at that multi-cluster gateway and traffic.
Yeah. Okay. Let me see if we can see it in here. Okay, so we can see there's an unmeshed source on 4191, which is the metrics endpoint.
At 0.2 requests per second, which is every 5 seconds, which is, that's probably it. Yeah. And it's from an unmeshed source.
Yes.
So on the one hand, because it's unmeshed, we don't know very much about it. But on the other hand, it's a nice validation, and we can...
Right.
It feels really likely that that's health probes, but I don't know why they'd be going to 4191. Sorry, the reason that feels likely to be health probes to me is that health probes tend to happen every few seconds depending how they're configured, and they always come from an unmeshed source because they're coming from the kubelet, which we cannot mesh. So a low frequency unmeshed source makes me feel like a health probe. But again, I don't know why we would have configured that on 4191. That's the part that feels odd to me. Yeah. Might be a misconfiguration. And of course, we could go look at the resource for that deployment and then figure it out.
Yeah. So are there any other questions before we just start kind of like just going through each of these panels? Because I don't want to miss anything whilst we're...
not that I have seen. So I think you should just start going through rather than having me distract you.
No. Distract as you'd like to. So so we've got the overview. We've just been through that. The control plane again, as I mentioned before. This view kind of like brings into the view the clusters that you've got, or the control planes. the success rates and those golden metrics. We can also have a look at sort of some of these mTLS certificate, the trust root expiry, and the webhook certificates as well that we need to make sure that we're rotating. And then of course you can see kind of, okay, well, within those control planes, like what applications have I got deployed? How many pods are there? Have they been restarting? Which you can see I have got a service mirror here that's been restarting quite a few times. So something's not very happy, or something wasn't very happy an hour ago.
It looks like it's still not very happy, doesn't that say
Yes.
0 out of 1 ready?
Yes. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So you can kind of like quickly get a view of, okay, what's happening in the cluster I didn't know about, or what's happening in any of my clusters that I didn't know about.
I find that one really fascinating because I can't think of any reason why a service mirror should be misbehaving.
No, well, usually either connectivity or authorization with the opposite cluster. I like this view quite a lot because I can quickly see a lot of information about a lot of my workloads in a lot of my clusters. And so as you can see, I can see data across 2 different clusters in different namespaces, different workloads. I can see information about different ports. And then I see the golden metrics for all of those. So this is I like this amount of information on the screen. I quite like that kind of single pane of glass view that you get with all this information. And we use it a lot when we're talking to customers, when we're doing onboarding, when we're going through sort of environment reviews with customers, or just when we're chatting to them about, how they're finding Linkerd, how they're finding Buoyant Cloud. Do they actually know what's going on in any of their clusters? That's the big one. And quickly going to this view usually raises the that success rate is lower than I thought on in that cluster. Let's go figure out what's going on there.
And for a proxy injector, I mean, maybe your pods aren't churning, and so it has no work to do, so it's not talking. But
of course,
I wonder a little bit more about some of these other things.
Yeah. I mean, again,
I guess that is worth. I'm sorry. I guess that is worth pointing out that the golden metrics don't show up if there's no traffic, and so those dashed lines would imply that there's no traffic to look at for those, which should then prompt you to ask other questions like, why is there no traffic, or should there be traffic?
Yeah. And again, we've got sort of similar view in TCP metrics. Obviously, the actual data we get is a lot different because we're not getting those kind of like HTTP metrics out. But similar kind of view where you can get like a good overview of many clusters, many namespaces, many workloads, and then see what's happening within those. And then resource usage. This is probably not used that often, I don't think. I think there's probably other places that customers would expect us. I would expect customers to look at when they're kind of looking at resource usage, but it's there anyway. So data plane. This is kind of a similar view to the control plane view in terms of like a lot of the information you can get. We can see the versions when pods were created. We can get that kind of multi-cluster, multi-namespace, multi-workload view. And then again, like we can in other areas of Buoyant Cloud, we can kind of like filter on, okay, well, I only want to look at information about, @1, because I've got @1 deployed in multiple clusters. So I want to kind of have a look, okay, well, are they on the same version? You can obviously drill down a little bit further to look at hardware usage and some diagnostic information there as well. But the data plane is super, super useful for just making sure that during maintenance windows, during upgrades, that proxies are on the same version as the control planes.
While you're picking the next one, there is another question that showed up on the public chat about whether bCloud has the functionality of sending a flare like the Datadog thing does. And we obviously have send diagnostics, but I don't think that really alerts anybody at Buoyant yet, right?
The send diagnostics?
Yeah.
The send diagnostics, again, like it's something that we use, but we tend to use it very selectively, depending on what the customer's asking. Yeah, yeah. So we can get into that question as we kind of like move down the some of these other
Sounds good.
other features. Yeah. Topology, we've touched on that a few times. I'm not going to go over that much more. Metrics, again, this is one of my favorite views because it's a lot of information in one place where I don't have to do too much clicking around and too much scrolling. I can kind of get a decent overview of, okay, the big metric is, okay, well, what's failing or what's not failing, or not what, but is anything failing and is everything successful? Volume in terms of how many requests, and then just how much CPU. I mean, you can see just there that across my applications, I'm using around 1/10 of a CPU core, so really lightweight, and memory usage is also pretty low.
Now, there's a thing on there about matching 36 workloads. How do you control what we're looking at?
So you want to kind of like filter down into like an app. Yeah, so you can do that. You can kind of like combine. So you can look at kind of in the first SMA demo cluster that I've got, you can kind of look at app 1 and app 2 if you wanted to. You can kind of like compare, all those metrics that we were talking about to kind of get a good comparison of, oh, okay, well, what's the difference between these two apps maybe, or, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And again, you can kind of like, there's a few more filters over here from namespace to port, those kind of plain text and unknown connections that we've got, and kind of what's the resource usage on those. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Again, more information on the workloads. This gives you a little bit more information about like, okay, well, what version of the agent are we using? What's the image of the application? Now I've just gone for a kind of a basic Alpine container for the demo app that I was using. Well, not really demo app in itself, just an application that we could deploy and have a look at. Plus, as you can see, I'm deployed in AWS, and so I've got those AWS
You're making me
nodes.
sad, Joe. You didn't just deploy faces.
I didn't. No. I just went with a very yeah. Maybe next time. Although I have nothing against faces, I should make that point. I have nothing against faces. I used faces for my talk at KubeCon a few weeks ago. Yeah. But yeah, just so some more information. Is it a daemon set? Is it a deployment? What version are we talking about? Are we meshed? How many pods are healthy? How many are running? Of course, the ones that are 2 out of 2 are generally daemon sets, and I've got 2 nodes, which is why you're seeing 2 out of 2 there. But yeah, pretty simple information, but always useful. Again, that multi-cluster, multi-namespace, multi-kind of deployment, golden metrics view of HTTP, TCP, resource usage, and then what's the default policy? And that's something we haven't really spoken about just yet, but in one of the next views, we should see some more policy-based information. So,
and honestly, vCloud's ability to show you things about policy is a pretty big deal.
Yeah. This is one of the most in sort of larger estates and sort of organizations where they are really tightly constrained on, what network traffic they want to allow and kind of accept, where you have those kind of zero trust, like super zero trust, that's just jailbreak namespace jailbreaks, where you've kind of got, okay, app 1 can only talk to app 2 but not app 3. This kind of like off policy area of Buoyant Cloud's kind of really useful for kind of showing, okay, well, what policies have I got? What ports are they running on? How many workloads have I got that's using those policies and those servers? So we've got servers at the minute. We've got the multi-cluster server objects. We've got the same things for both clusters. Auth policies, I've not actually got any custom auth policies set up, but you can see information on that. So you can click into one of these and kind of say, okay, well, what does that actually look like? Well, you can kind of see, if you know that if a customer's getting an error in their log saying, this route, the traffic's taken, it's been blocked by this policy, they can come quickly have a look at what that policy looks like without having to maybe go into their kind of IDE or terminal or their Git UI and digging through all the different files they might have, and they might have like dynamic values in there, so they're trying to work out what this looks like when it's kind of just in raw text. It's like, okay, well, there you have it.
Yeah. Like I said, this is one of the kind of cool bits about Buoyant Cloud, because auth policy can be very complex, and as Joe's noting, finding out what the auth policy is can be very challenging in a lot of cases. So having a simple way where, even if Joe does not have access to run kube control against this cluster, if the customer has arranged for him to have access to this website, it gives us a way that we can see some of this stuff. It gives the customers ways they can see some of this stuff without exposing kube control to everybody. So this can be a really big deal.
Yeah.
And I guess I probably should point out there that putting your data into Buoyant Cloud does not automatically mean that anybody at Buoyant can go and look at your stuff in Buoyant Cloud. That is not the way this works.
No. But yeah, just to kind of like touch on policy again quickly before we move on, we've also got this multi-cluster pane where you can just look at the kind of the multi-cluster specific objects that we've got. So you can see the cluster credential secret there, kind of what this looks like, what the gateway address is, so on and so forth. So events, this is quite a big one. This is one that I talk to customers about all the time, because quite often might not be an incident, might not be an outage, but it could be sort of just someone's doing some routine checking of what's going on in my cluster. They see an event and they're like, oh, well, this workload restarted, or oh, I'm seeing a traffic event. Like, I need to look into that. Can you help me? And so we quite often will jump on a call or do some kind of like async conversation where we're kind of walking the customer through. Okay, well, this information, this data has been surfaced in Buoyant Cloud. Like, this is how we would go about setting correct auth policies up. This is how we'd go about in the topology view, seeing what that traffic actually is and where it's coming from. And is this happening across all of your clusters? Have you just misconfigured something? Is this because you've deployed a new version of an application and it's now making additional calls to different upstreams? Or we get to see context from these kind of like high level pieces of information that we can surface. So we've got.
And this, I think, was where you were going to talk about the send a flare question.
Yeah, well, just to go back quickly, actually, to talk about how we actually send the diagnostics bundle. So you can go into control plane and you can kind of, there's a little button here, send diagnostics to Buoyant, and kind of like, this is where you would send that flare, that bundle, that information to us. I'm not going to click it right now because I wouldn't want anyone to panic about how this SMA is going, knowing that I'm on here with you, and it's like.
So when you do that, what actually happens from Buoyant's point of view? Like
we receive this information, and then we generally get this. Generally, what happens is we're already talking to the customer at this point, right. Because this send diagnostics to bundle isn't something that customers would do without like talking to us, because otherwise there's no context and what's going on. So yeah, we get this information and we can kind of use it to kind of diagnose and talking deep context. But okay, well, we have these logs now. We can see that your control plane is unhappy because a certificate's expired or because something else happened. And okay, you can get some of that information in Buoyant Cloud without clicking on that, but sometimes it's easier. Customers might not be aware of where some of this information is, and so if there's lots going on, if they're in in a state where there's lots of clusters, they're not sure where to look, they're not even sure where the problem is, we can just say, okay, well, let's send the diagnostics to us. We have the clusters filtered in the drop down. Let's see what's going on. And so, yeah, we would receive like an artifact of information. And like I said, we're kind of working on kind of building on this at the moment with other bundles, and some teams even need kind of like a custom bundle. So we don't really offer that as we don't offer that as by default, but we do that for some customers where they've got highly customized environments where this might not be the best way of getting all the information that we want.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When you do the send diagnostics, does it do any sort of alert within Buoyant, or does it just show up someplace that you can go look at?
We get it in our support team. We'll receive the bundle, and yeah, it's not like it could be left there for days or hours and no one notices it. Like, we get notified when a bundle's been sent to us. So it's not like, yeah, you could send it, but no one might, But then again, like I said, we're kind of already expecting it generally because we're already talking to the customer about something that they want to know about. So, yeah. So yeah,
note to self: don't go randomly clicking the button for no purpose. Just
no. Yeah. So yeah, just in terms of Buoyant Cloud and how to configure it, we've got different users. We've got the alerting.
That goes back to the access thing I was talking about, where you can add users and
Yeah, that's right. And you can use the invite button. You can set different roles. We've got admin, editor, and viewer. So you might have someone in the team that just needs to be able to see the information but not do anything with any of the alerting rules and notifications, and getting rid of clusters and things like that. So they'd obviously be read only, but so you can use the invite to kind of add users in. Those alerting rules that we've got, so you can obviously add a rule. We do provide a lot of this out of the box. I've not set any of these up myself. So this comes with the Buoyant Cloud deployment, but you can kind of edit these, and you can do quite a lot with these rules, or you can just add your own. You can add a rule, set a cluster. So my cluster's at the bottom there. I can look at, maybe I want to keep an eye on proxy CPUs. Maybe I've deployed a new version of an application, and I want to make sure that it doesn't start, there's not an issue where it starts spamming connections, where we might see some kind of elevated CPU usage in the proxy. Things like that do happen. So I would always I always do when I'm doing onboarding calls and I'm talking to organizations that are considering and evaluating whether Buoyant Cloud is something that they want to move forward with and want to implement in their estate. I always say, spend time getting these notifications right at the beginning, so that you're not left frustrated when there is an incident, because you have to assume there's going to be an incident at some point, and it's just how well set up you are to react to it. And so having the right information surfaced early as possible is imperative. But like you can see in the background, there's quite a lot that comes out of the box with appropriate severities set, and you can change them if you need to. So here's where you can add these notification rules. You can set them on different clusters again, because you might have development clusters, test clusters, UAT, production, and the same for workloads. Like, you might have critical workloads, non-critical workloads. You might split your applications like that, and it's like, okay, well, I want a different set of notifications configured for my critical apps. My non-critical apps, they can be set to kind of I only want notifications for like sev ones for those, but for prod applications, I want every severity. I want to know whenever something happens. And that's where we kind of set those severity filters there. We've got obviously email notifications, Slack, Teams, PagerDuty, and Datadog. So you can kind of go through the wizard of each one and kind of set some notifications up there. And like I said, I know that a lot of customers are now doing this. I think Teams, when they first adopt Buoyant Cloud, they don't always set these notification rules up. They use Buoyant Cloud more of like a reporting and kind of like manual analysis tool that they kind of only want to look at when they know they're looking for a piece of information. But I think now with the way that estates are growing so quickly, microservice footprints growing, the amount of engineers that are using more than like just a couple of pieces in the stack. What I mean by that is, I think many years ago, like team formats were very typically different, where it was like you had a particular job in a particular team. You were, providing the team was more than kind of like 5 or 10 people, and you were kind of like given a specific area. Whereas now, I think because of the tools, I think more engineers are using more tools, and so these notification rules are being used more often, right? Like it's more of a proactive thing than being a reactive or being like just like like I say, a reporting tool.
It's also, I mean, certainly if there's something urgent happening, I would kind of rather see it show up on Slack than an email, because
Right, exactly.
I don't check my email. I mean, I check it every day, but I don't, it's not just sitting there waiting to notify me if something critical comes up.
Right, exactly. Of course. We have some settings. So again, you can kind of just see like those integrations that I just showed in the notifications. I'm not sure if that appeared actually. Does that show when I go to add? Yes, it does. I just wanted to double check that what I was just talking about was actually being shown. Because if not, I could talk about it here. But it's the same thing basically. You just set up your integrations there to those notification tools. And then we've got the support docs. Sorry, that's actually the support portal if you need to raise a ticket. And again, that's just like a very easy jump from, oh, I've seen something going on in my Buoyant Cloud UI. I can see there's an issue. Well, okay, well, you're only a couple of clicks away from being able to raise a ticket with our support team, and then we can talk about it.
Yeah.
And of course,
And
the docs.
Docs.
Yes. So again, this is where I would strongly suggest folks have a look if they're kind of still unsure, or if anyone's watching, maybe later on after the live stream's ended, there's any questions, have a look here first. Although I'm obviously in the Linkerd Slack, so I can be contacted pretty easily with any questions folks might have.
Speaking of Slack, the other thing that we should have pointed out towards the beginning was, if you want to, that's how you get to Buoyant Cloud itself, once you have it set up and everything. And if you are interested in trying all of this out for yourself, go over to enterprise.buoyant.io, and you should be able to sign up for a trial or to set things up so you talk to Joe or somebody like Joe. That's where you get started with everything, which we also strongly encourage.
Yes. And if anyone does have any questions later on, please do not hesitate to ask. This I would say that this Buoyant Cloud is absolutely one of our most valued, well used, and loved features.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we have a couple more minutes. If other questions show up, we have not seen a whole lot of questions, which I am personally okay with. I expect that people will go and watch this later. And so, Joe, you might be getting questions much later about this.
I hope so.
Next time around, and you can sign up at buoyant.io/SMA for our next Service Mesh Academy. While we are doing this, I'm going to change the way this thing looks to match everything else. Can you tell we're doing this live, folks? Next time around in the month of May, we will have, I think we have Ehsan on to talk about troubleshooting Linkerd. And that's, I believe, going to be a lot about how you troubleshoot Linkerd itself if you feel like your mesh is doing something weird. Although I expect we're probably going to be talking also about using Linkerd to troubleshoot other things. So that should be fun. And again, buoyant.io/SMA, that's how you go and sign up for that. I should have the date on here already, but I don't, for which I apologize. That will be happening on the 14th of May. And we'll finish off with the getting started link one more time. But Joe, thanks very much for showing up and sharing it. We really appreciate it. We'll get you back on, I'm sure. And I'm not seeing more questions at the moment, so I think we're going to go ahead and call this a wrap.
Cool. Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Cheers, folks.
All right.